So I'd like to welcome up next Dr. Steve Needel, who is going to be talking about virtual reality. And as we said, not all these sessions are strictly mobile. We are also including some of these other areas which touch into the digital landscape that we find ourselves in today. So, I'm going to welcome up Steve to come talk about virtual reality.
Good. Thank you, Guy. Good morning, everybody. Thanks. As researchers, we're compelled to start this off by asking a research question. How many people read the LinkedIn posts in like Shopper Insights or Consumer Insights? Are people reading the posts? Okay, good, a fair number of you. So you'll understand in part where I'm coming from. If you read these posts on a regular basis, you get the sense that market research is ill. Things are not going well, everything is gloomy. It's very depressing, actually. And it's clear to me as a psychologist that the problem is that market researchers, by and large, seem to suffer from low job self-esteem. There. We all have, and you got to say this in a really whiny teenager voice, management doesn't respect me, and why won't they listen to me? And there are two ways to approach the answer to this, because that's part of what I want to talk about today, is how you get around this. You can take the statistician approach to life and say, gee, if I take all the marketing researchers in the world and I take the average, half of them are below average, and that's why nobody listens to you, because you're a below average researcher. I find that unsatisfying as an approach. So I'm going to take a medical model approach. And the medical model approach says, first fix the problem, then figure out what's causing the problem, and go back and figure out how to fix that. So let me start off by telling you how to fix the problem, because it's just so easy, it's scary. You just need to be the expert. When we saw from Dr. Sexton before, I think it was before, talking about how few people think, management thinks their researchers are doing well in there. I mean, what a terrible number in there. Your managers expect you to be an expert. They expect you to be the gatekeeper. They want to come to you with problems and you say, oh yeah, I know how to answer that, and here's 4 different ways, and here's how much it costs, and here's why I like this way. They want you to be the appraiser of new technology. Remember, and a lot of times you're dealing with marketing people, and marketing people are really like bright and shiny objects. So whenever they see a technique that's bright and shiny, they're like, ooh, 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 I got to do fMRI. I'll talk about fMRI in a bit. I got to do fMRI on my buyers. No, you don't, not necessarily. You need to be the appraiser. So you need to understand these techniques and say, yeah, this is good for this, but it's bad for that. You need to be the translator when it comes to understanding the data that it puts out, because the data is never, from any of our cool techniques, understandable. Somebody's got to translate it, and you need to translate it to your company. And then you need to be the advocate for your work. So you need to be the expert. Now, my agenda today is really simple. You're going to hear about lots of new bright and shiny things. And I want you to stop as you're listening to this new and bright and shiny stuff and say, you know, is it real? How do we critically evaluate this? I'm going to take you through this process of how do you think about this stuff by talking about a lot of the new technology, some of which I think people are going to talk about today. Thankfully, some of them are not going to talk about today, because then it keeps me from standing up and making embarrassing comments or questions. We are, for such a bright group of people, researchers are really bad at actually evaluating research in there. It's something we as an industry don't do well. We used to not market ourselves well either, but we've gotten over that part. A lot of the techniques that you're going to see today, that you're seeing all over in marketing research, have a whole set of hidden assumptions and limitations, inherent limitations on their application. So I want to take you through these. I've already told you how to treat the problem, be an expert. Now I want to talk about the problems. I want to talk about the research maladies that we run into. I'm going to ask you, is eye tracking making us blind? Is neuroscience making us stupid? And is my latest favorite, is emotion recognition making us nauseous. Let's take eye tracking first. Eye tracking is a great way to measure attention in there. If you want to know pretty much what somebody's paying attention to while they're awake, looking at what their eyes are focused on is a darn good way to do it. The fact that we can now do this in a mobile sense, we have mobile deployment of eye tracking devices, is even better in there because it takes us out of the unreality of looking at a fixed stimulus and lets you see what's going on in the normal world. So this is cool. It can also be relatively unobtrusive. I grew up in the days when you had to wrench your head into a device and they'd screw you in so that your head was not moving. Now the eye tracking technology from companies like Tobii are just so flexible, it's amazing. But people are still doing, and I ran into this last week with a client, they're taking this technology and using unrealistic stimuli. They're taking stimuli in isolation. They're taking condensed stimuli. Remember, you can only, if you're doing shelf set work, which is a lot of my business in there, they're taking 4-foot shelves of cereal because that's all you can show somebody and have them do eye tracking. This is not realistic. Cereal comes in 50-foot shelves, not 4-foot shelves. The bigger problem, I'm going to hammer this on the next two technologies, it has no relationship to sales. There is not a published study in a even vaguely refereed journal that says the more attention you pay to an object, the better its sales, or the more likely to buy it. The best you see, mostly from Pierre Chandon, who's done most of the good work in this, is, oh, if you don't see it, you don't buy it. Well, duh, I didn't have to do an eye tracking study to tell you that would be the outcome. Neuromarketing, which used to be, until I ran into emotion recognition, my favorite bugaboo, especially because I had to take more than my fair share of neuropsych courses these many years ago back at UConn. It purports to measure attention, arousal, and emotion. I say purports because we actually don't know what the hell it measures in there. We do know that EEG measures electrical impulses, and we do know that fMRI tends to measure blood flow. We have no clue what that means, but we know that it measures it, so that's good news in there. We can measure stuff in there. There is research that shows that presenting neuroscience information, the results of fMRI or EEG or GSR or any of those, is over-evaluated. It's given more weight in a business decision than should ever be given. So we already have a tendency to believe this is so bright and shiny and cool, and I show you color pictures, that it's got to be good stuff, even though we don't quite know what it means. It ignores the fact, and the only company I've seen that gets around this is Interscope. It ignores the fact that arousal for stuff needs to be well above a baseline to be read. Now, let me tell you what the implication for that. You're walking down the cereal. Anybody here from General Mills? They must be in the other. Okay. You walk it. Good. Then I can talk freely. You're walking down the aisle and you see Cheerios. And I eat Cheerios because I'm diabetic and it's really low in all the bad stuff that I shouldn't have. Now, I got to tell you, my brain is not firing bang, 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 and the blood flow in my brain is not going because I'm looking at Cheerios. Show me a box of Cocoa Puffs, and it's a different story. But most of the things we buy are grocery products. And most of the things we buy out of habit because we tried them once and it tasted good, or we tried it once and it cleaned my toilet. I'm not getting emotional about it. I'm not getting aroused by it, even in my brain. They forget to tell you, if you read the popular books, they really forget to tell you, that arousal is affect neutral. We do not know if your brain is firing, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing that you're thinking about what it's firing about. You will hear people, and if you ever go on the neuromarketing LinkedIn sites, they love to talk about how this particular piece of the brain is firing. Well, what they all know, because they all read the same damn book from a few years ago, Damasio's book, is the brain is a system. There's not a place where you evaluate TV ads and another place where you think about radio and another place where mobile comes in. It's a system. We don't know what localization is yet. We might in the future. Most importantly, they have yet to demonstrate that understanding the neuroscience of a product, the reaction you have, has anything to do with the product's preference or sales in there. They have yet to demonstrate, and nobody bring up biology because that's never been replicated. Nobody can replicate those examples of the preference for Coke versus Pepsi. Now my latest one. There is a company who will remain nameless. But if you ask me later, I'm happy to tell you who it is. But they'll remain nameless while I'm on videotape. And this company puts out what looks like a PR piece from the speech the president of the company and owner of the company gave, talking about facial image recognition in there. And the idea is simple. Emotions drive purchasing. We'll hold on to that thought, compared to rational thought. People can't tell you what they're feeling, but micro-expressions will reveal all. So their claim, and I put this in quotes because I couldn't believe it either. The science is complex, and the ability to analyze human responses is held by only a few trained individuals. Now, for those of you who aren't full-time market researchers, what that means is only I can do it, and I can charge you a shitload for it. Now, the reality. Human beings have only 7 basic emotions. All human beings, don't care whether you're an Australian Aborigine to you grew up like me in Boston. You have the same 7 basic emotions in there. And Paul Ekman, the psychologist who figured all this out, will train you to recognize these emotions in roughly 40 minutes for only $39.95. Okay? This is hardly a complex science that's limited to a few individuals. More importantly, it's got some assumptions that make no sense. It relies on the assumption that emotions drive our purchasing behavior. Yes, sometimes they do. I bought my first Saab because I just felt like I looked hot in a convertible. Okay? But I got to tell you again, I'm not emotional about my Cheerios or my Cocoa Puffs or my Charmin. And 90% of what I buy is stuff in the grocery store or Walmart, as the case may be. It may be driven by unconscious thought. It may be driven by habit. It may have originally been driven by an emotion, no more. It also assumes that we're not competent to measure emotions as researchers. And I take personal affront to that. I'm pretty sure I can tell you if somebody likes or dislikes an ad or a product because I got lots of tools that don't require emotional coding and $50,000, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I want to apologize. I could have picked on big data today. I could have picked on social media. I could have picked on behavioral economics, one of my other favorites lately, a whole school of thought that's rehashed social psychology from the 1960s. Our job as marketing researchers, I don't care what you're doing, at the end of the day, your job is to predict what shoppers will buy, to help your company sell more stuff. Okay, I can't emphasize enough. Your job, your only real job, is to help your company sell more stuff. So you've got a consumer that's interacting with everything here, with computers, with television, with stores, with social media, and all these new technologies, and many of the others we haven't talked about, all assume that all this stuff comes inside, it gets mushed around, and that's the technical term in there. It gets mushed around, and out comes a sales decision. Okay? They're great technologies because for the most part they're unobtrusive in there. You don't have to ask people questions. You can do it off of video. You can do it off of telemetry. They have a disadvantage in that none of them have ever shown to improve your sales. So, as you're thinking about mobile stuff today, mobile still needs to prove itself as a separate area or endeavor in what we're doing. The big question is, the big question should be, is mobile research any good? A recent study that was published in Research World shows that, yeah, you can get similar demographics off of mobile. That was one of the original arguments, was it would just be kids. No, you can get a very normal sample. Your response rates are much weaker than either online or SMS, but that's okay, because you can still just put out so many of them, who cares? Your dropout rates are accelerated, who cares in there? If you're stupid enough to be asking 20, 30 questions when the dropout rate comes on a mobile device, you deserve what you get. But the key is the answers are different. Okay, that's the key finding from this study. The answers are different, and we need to understand what that means in there. Before you fully embrace this stuff, you ought to say, I know I get different answers than an online survey or a mall survey. Are they different better, different worse, or just different? So for you researchers, to fix what ails you, just do your job well, and people will love you. Be the expert. Understand what marketing wants, understand what the corporation needs, understand what suppliers are pitching in there, because I hate to say it, but we're not always as forthcoming as you might want us to be. Understand the limitations of the tools, especially so when you're dealing with new technologies. Evaluate this all with your eyes wide open. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That was absolutely great, and there were some fantastic tweets coming in during your piece.
I'm afraid to forget.
Okay, I'm going to ask if there are any questions for Steve at all. Okay, I've got two over here.
So you talked about evaluating these new technologies and tools. How do you go about that? Like, what are the techniques you use to evaluate something new?
Sure. When I do virtual reality shopping for a living as a research tool, we had to show that in virtual reality, people would shop like they would normally shop. Once we satisfied our clients that that would happen, we then had to go and show that we could predict what would happen in market from our data. So we were able to have a client base somewhere around here, did an in-store test, in-market test. And at the same time, we did the simulation, and we were able to compare our data and say, look, I can predict what you're going to get out of your in-store test. Instead of $1 million test, I can do this for $40,000. The same way. Neuromarketing needs to show that when you get certain patterns of brain neural activity, however you measure it, in there, it has something to do with your preference for a product in there. If you're a Coke drinker and you hate Pepsi, you ought to see a whole lot more activity for Coke than Pepsi, and vice versa.
Okay, we've got another question over here. Yeah.
This is partly a comment, but also a question. One of the riddles to me is the perpetuation of the so-called purchase funnel, hierarchy of effects model, et cetera, which about 10 or 12 years ago has been shown in a variety of studies not to be relevant, except when you have a rational purchase, which I think where it connects to some of the things you were talking about. So again, the old, I'll call it old, outdated awareness, liking, preference, and so on model. Again, as I said, I still find taught by my colleagues and also sold by consulting firms, a few of which who finally, I won't mention them, but a few major ones have finally said this doesn't work. We're moving back. About 4 months ago, the head of one large consulting firm said, we're not going to sell the purchase funnel anymore. So anyway, as I said, it's more of a comment, but I think it does fit nicely into some of the things we're talking about. Any response, feedback?
Yeah. We like to pretend we understand things like the latest catchphrase is the path to purchase. In there. Guys, we don't have a clue. In there. We just don't have a clue. Now, we're not that old of science. In there. Market research has only been around 60, 70 years maybe in there, and our tools have been, as you all know, are dramatically better even from when I started 30 years ago. Hell, Joe Ottaviani and I, we were doing day after recall back then for advertising, which we all realize is silly now. You just need to embrace the fact that you don't know. Learn where you can learn. But at the same time, there are lots of technologies, mine being one of them, but lots of others, that let you skip that mediational part. Skip the why are they behaving like this part, and go to the when I do this, what happens versus when I do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. For the purpose of time, we're going to move on.